Hi everyone, Steve Crosby here. Welcome to this issue of Monday Morning Musings, where we are continuing on at a very surface level introduction into Plato's thought. In our last episode, I tried to establish the credibility of my sources and just give you one thought from the early Platonic period that even early on, Plato's belief was that the soul was immortal. Now, jumping through time and jumping through layers of category, in the middle period of Plato's writings, no less than 85 times, Plato is beginning to develop something that he's most commonly known by, and that is his theory of ideas, something that Plato developed and Plotinus took on later regarding the nous, N-O-U-S, the mind, the perfect mind, that God or the deity or whatever you want to call it exists in a state of perfect ideation, perfect ideals. And so in this middle period, he starts to develop a theory of the soul in a very technical and a very metaphysical sense, in a very metaphysical way. And you pick it up again when you read through Plato's writings, and if you categorize them as this gentleman has, and the different periods and the different styles and the emphases, you see a progression of thought, but there's still a common thread. And obviously I'm repeating myself because the common thread is that the soul is constitutionally immortal. So here we have like a middle period at the front end of his the stuff that he's most famous for, and he says this: the soul, through all her being. Now think about this. Every facet of the soul is immortal. For that which is ever in motion is immortal. But that which moves another and is moved by another, in ceasing to move, ceases also to live. Only the self-moving, never leaving self, never ceases to move, and it is the fountain and beginning of motion to all that moves and everything besides. Now, I know that's tall weeds of philosophy, but have you ever heard or a science fiction movie where he's the prime mover? God is like the force. It's always impersonal. And he's the prime mover. He is the one upon whom no one else has any effect. It's not possible to move the prime deity. He can't be moved. That doctrine works its way into the church over time in the doctrine of impassibility, that the Father, God in his essence, cannot be touched. Nothing can move upon him, because if he is affected, he can't be divine. So that's why he has to incarnate it as Jesus, so that the deity can feel things, etc., etc., etc. But I just wanted to give this to you as a nugget, that in those science fiction movies and in, well, I believe in God, I just don't believe in Jesus, but I believe God is the prime mover, the one who's eternally in motion, and that motion, if we're involved in the motion. Listen, I see that stuff on Facebook all the time. It's just rehashed Platonism. It's not new. Oh, God's the eternal dance. Ooh, the perichoretic dance. The Trinity dancing with one another. All right, okay. I believe in perichoresis, but the idea of that, the one upon whom moves everything else, but nothing can move him, that comes from Plato. It's just that simple. It comes from Plato. Now, in his later period, and this is the one that is the most common, and the idea of the soul that most people are familiar with, it develops his idea of the soul. The most common usage of the soul is there's some categories: simple, pure, uncompounded, otherwise Tomato soup, not vegetable soup, not made up of any component elements, uncompounded, unmade, invisible, rational, logos, immortal entity. But all those adjectives are not being described, are not primarily being limited to God and our Father as we would know it, but to us. He is saying that we existed that way before we were born, because we exist as soul. Some Christians would say soul/spirit or spirit. That as humans, our true nature is soul, and it's that perfected soul. And we existed that way before time began. Plato is describing how the nature of the soul was in its original state before it was contaminated by evil. But in its nature, evil can't destroy it, according to Plato, because it's perfect. The soul cannot be made up of many different things, according to Plato, and because it is constitutionally immortal, it cannot be destroyed, it cannot be overcome by evil, it can't suffer loss, because the soul is not touchable by these things. You would think with that kind of language, he's talking about the Godhead. No, he's talking about you and I. Do you see why this would be appealing to people who are not well taught in the Christian faith? And I'm going to read another quote from Plato and wrap it up on this session. For Plato, the soul exists in its eternal existence, not its temporary existence, captured in a body. Oh, I heard so much of that language. We're just captured in this body. But in its eternal existence in the realm of ideas, this is a quote from Plato. Her, referring to the soul and the feminine, immortality is demonstrated by my previous argument. And there are many other proofs, but to see her as she really is, you got to see yourself as you really are. You have to see yourself. You're not this, you're really that, the invisible things. You're not a terrible person. You're a wonderful person. You just got to discover your beauty that you had with God in the beginning before you were contaminated by sin. But to see her as she really is, not as we now behold her, otherwise, not according to what we see with our human existence. Listen to this. Marred or damaged by communion with the body and other miseries. You must contemplate her with the eye of reason in her original purity. Folks, there it is. The body is something alien to the human species. It's something that we are forced to commune with. Something that is fundamentally marring to our existence. The body is not a gift from God. The body is something to be rid of, escape from. And how do you do it? By the eye of reason. Now you say, well, the Christian faith, we're not rationalists. We're fideists or faithists. We approach things by faith. Well, no, not when you start to unpack the Logos doctrine. The Logos just means ultimate rationality among many other things. We apply our reason. How do we apply our reason? By studying the scriptures. We bring our mind. We subdue our mind. We bring it in alignment with the scriptures. And when we are good at that and succeed at that, we actually get to see what's really true? Do you see this dualistic separation? Not only separation, but antagonism towards the material realm that's embedded in Plato's thought. There it is. And so when you see this stuff on Facebook, it's nothing new. See you next time.